Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. A big welcome to everyone here. A few things before we start on this panel with Claire, Heidi, and Lisa. We will be recording this session. It'll be available on ReFed's website shortly after the event. There will be a Q&A panel after this, so please use the microphone, or a microphone will be coming around if you have any questions. And lastly, just so that we focus on the panel, please make sure that your phones are muted. With that, we're excited to have such an amazing group on stage here. I want to start. There we go. Okay. I want to start the panel today with setting the stage. Can we talk about your own local context and infrastructure? I think everyone on this panel operates in very different city ecosystems, some with policy support, some without policy support. Can you describe what your local food waste infrastructure looks like and how your work fits within or outside of those systems? And Heidi, I'm going to start with you because your slide is up.
All right. Hi, I'm Heidi Rupke with Clean Memphis. And in Memphis, we have a city of about 1.4 million people in the metro area, spread over 4,600 square miles. So we have a lot of elbow room in Memphis, which really affects how we plan in terms of our solid waste. If we would have composting available, it's something that we would look at as something pretty expensive because the routes would be longer, we'd have to have more personnel. Policy-wise, we are very light on policy in Tennessee. Share tables are allowed, and food donation is allowed even beyond expiration dates, but that's really it. And so Clean Memphis, as a nonprofit, has really stepped in to lead in this space, to be responsive, creative to the needs that we really find in our communities. No policy isn't necessarily a bad thing for us because it gives us a lot of latitude to explore and to really do the work that's necessary to be pre-policy, to be policy ready, I guess, so that folks can understand what zero waste could mean for us and how that can play out.
Amazing. Claire, we'll go to you if that's the correct background.
Yes, so I'm Clare Miflin with the Center for Zero Waste Design, and so I'm in New York City. We have a lot less elbow room and a lot more policy and goals. I mean, we have mandatory food waste separation for larger commercial food service entities. We have now mandatory residential food scrap and yard waste diversion. We have goals to reduce food waste by 50%, a zero waste to landfill or incineration goal by 2030. That was made like 10 years ago and we haven't made any progress. So we have a lot of goals, but we don't have ways to get there and we're not really measuring our progress. So that's kind of a problem. So the entity that I head up, the Center for Zero Waste Design, actually came from the background, like I was moderating a panel about how the Department of Sanitation were bringing in brown bins for food scraps, tiny little 21-gallon brown bins. And I'm like, oh, I just designed a big multifamily building with a trash chute and 2 recycling chutes. Where does the brown bin fit in? And there was no answers. Nobody had thought about it. Of course you can't put that at the bottom of a chute. Would you put it on every floor? Well, I guess you could, but the whole point of the 3 chutes was so you didn't have to go to every floor every day. So nobody had really thought about the whole system from where stuff is thrown away to where it gets collected and where it gets processed. So that's where we came in, looking at, can we do zero waste design guidelines to show how we can design buildings and infrastructure for circularity into cities. And that's what we do. We really look at how we can make these things happen and make it easier for people to design simplicity. So how can we weave urban systems into ecosystems?
Lisa.
All right, thank you. I'm Lisa. I'm with the city of Boise, Idaho. I do not have a slide. So Idaho, if for those of you who are not familiar, is not Iowa, different state, but we actually border this beautiful state of Washington that we're in here. So we're just a quick flight away. We are a city of about 250,000 people, and we're also in a metro area that is approaching 1 million people pretty soon here. We, as a city, operate a residential curbside compost program. We were the first kind of program to do that in Idaho. Not surprisingly, we don't have a huge organics recycling, a lot of folks doing that in our state quite yet. But we did start our facility and program in 2017, so it's been almost a decade. We do have a really great participation rate. We service almost 80,000 homes, and we have a 97% opt-in rate for composting. We started accepting all food waste just this last year, which was a big accomplishment for us. So we do take meat and dairy and the whole gamut in our curbside carts. And we also just recently launched a food scrap drop-off program for our multifamily residents. So we now finally have organics recycling available to all of our residential homes if people choose to do it. Where we struggle as a community in Idaho for sure is the commercial side. We don't have a lot of infrastructure for hauling or composting or other processing options. So that's something that we're working on from a policy side, which I think we'll talk about a little more later. And as far as the food rescue and recovery scene in Boise, we have a number of nonprofits there's a lot of really good excitement about it, but there isn't anyone quite, like we have Heidi, people who are operating and really doing things at scale yet. So a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, but as a city, we're trying to work on ways that we can support that infrastructure to grow.
Thank you. And I feel like that was directed toward me because I recently found out that Idaho and Iowa are two separate states. I'm from Canada, everybody. Any other Canadians in the room? Okay, thank you, Canada. Okay. So Lisa and Heidi, your states don't have strong food waste policies, and like we talked about, that's not necessarily a disadvantage. As a Canadian tech company, when we started working in Arizona, I just Googled Arizona food waste, and it was like, oh, Arizona wastes the most food out of all of the states. But it was interesting to see that without policy, the people were actually advocating for a change. And so where you are based out of, how do you navigate this sort of lack of formal support, and what strategies have helped you make any progress? Yeah, we'll start with Heidi because I'll go to your slide.
All right. So, like you said, lack of policy isn't necessarily a bad thing because in Tennessee we don't have bad policy, we don't have unpopular policy, we don't have policy that people don't understand. So we have a lot of leeway. We have a lot of ways to be creative, a lot of space to try things. And we're really learning by doing, by getting our hands dirty, sometimes literally through trash sorts. And what we're discovering is that there are barriers, some of them lack of understanding around why this is important or how they could get started. Sometimes something as small as a piece of equipment that a nonprofit with a food program needs is standing in their way. We were told by one of our nonprofit partners that they had decided as a group not to rescue prepared foods because they were sloshy, and they didn't want their cars to smell like green beans in perpetuity. And who can blame them, right? So that is a friction point that had a really easy fix, and we were able to provide them with cargo mats for their cars. So now they are able to rescue more kinds of food that they can use in their food programs. So, yeah, I think we can see here that the challenges we find are almost always people related. And so as we're getting ready for a policy at some point, maybe, we can solve the problems that we're finding as we find them.
Sloshy is a very technical food rescue term for the food rescuers in the room. Lisa, what about you?
All right, so Idaho is still is kind of the Wild West. That was really the roots of a lot of the big West states that aren't the far coast here. And I think there's good things to that and there's bad things. One is we do not like regulation. We, the state, we are kind of a little bit different in our city here. But the other nice thing about that is that people really had to learn to rely on each other. And I think that still permeates through culture in a lot of the West, and especially the kind of more isolated cities in the West, where people have to lean on one another or else you just can't make it. We're very far from other economies, and we're very far from a lot of different outlets and transportation. So one benefit is that we do have relatively lax regulation, so if anybody's interested in starting a, decentralized composting facility, Idaho is a great place to do that. It's easier to operate there. And there is also this inherent respect for the land and for the soil, because agriculture is such an important historic part of our economy. So it's very easy to kind of draw that connection between people and soil and the roots. And I think that it's so easy for us to pull that back when we talk about food waste and to use that as our talking point. And we don't have to say climate if we don't want to. We do in Boise, but some places don't. And then as far as strategy, I think that, you hit it exactly when you talked about people. It is about people. It's about community. People love composting. People love recycling their food waste. And so when you ask people for feedback of what can we do better, what do we do, people love to give advice. And it's never critical of the work that you're doing. It's always suggestions. And so sometimes I know all of us that can be a little bit frustrating, but those suggestions are starting points for conversations to improve the work that we're doing.
Oh, that's such a positive outlook on it. That's great. Clare and back to Lisa, you focus, Clare in particular, you focus on zoning and design. And can I just, I've nerded out already with these ladies, but my background is actually in urban planning, and then I also have a food rescue background, and so having those two worlds collide, I'm just a super nerd on this panel. So how do planning and land use policies either support or block circular systems, and what really would smarter zoning for organics look like in your city?
Sure, but before I answer that, I'm going to say there are like 10 empty seats if any of you guys at the back want to sit down. There's plenty of spare seats in the front. So
Come right to the front.
I think I have a slide on this one, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So yeah, I've thought a lot about circular cities and what they're like physically, and how our cities are really designed for the linear economy, with like manufacturing and trash transfer stations on the outskirts of cities and commercial and residential within cities. So if you're going to change to a circular city, you really have to change zoning, because it's distributed small-scale infrastructure we need across the city. And we're no longer talking about categories like transfer stations and incineration. We're talking about composting or small-scale recycling. And I'm really happy that New York City just changed its zoning resolution, for the first time, I don't know, in 50 years. I mean, the zoning uses, you'd be amazed. There's like millinery and like taxidermy, but there's not composting. They're so out of date. So like having new categories like composting, and it is allowed now in pretty much every zone of the city. It can be an accessory use for those of you zoning nerds. It can be a standalone use up to 5,000 square foot in any commercial or manufacturing zone, and the same for small scale recycling. So that's a huge change to allow distributed infrastructure, and I think that's really necessary for circularity. And we've also looked a lot about organic circularity. So there, in New York City, we actually have the largest community composting network in the nation. And they used to be supported by the Department of Sanitation. Unfortunately, now we have municipal composting, which isn't composting. It goes to the sewage treatment plant for anaerobic digestion. Way better than going to landfill, but it's not regenerating our soils. So Department of Sanitation started to do that and stopped funding the community composters, who are doing such valuable work of going out there, getting volunteers to help them compost, taking that kind of degraded soil we see in our parks and making it really vibrant and able to absorb stormwater, making our street trees healthier. Luckily, the city council saw that, and they've funded them in the interim, and hopefully are about to fund them this year. But we've kind of looked at how that could work. So there on the right is Prospect Park. It's the largest park in Brooklyn, I believe. Anyway, it's the one I live near, and it's a beautiful one. But we're like, okay, those 85,000 households around the park, if they did reduce their food waste by 50%, as is our goal, and they took their food waste to like 4 facilities in the park, which could be under the DEC limit, so you can have it much easier to site, you could provide enough compost to put 1/2 inch on that grassy areas of the park every year. So just kind of looking at what the circularity would be at scale. And New York City's dense, so in Manhattan, the parks likely are not able to take all of the food waste, even at 50%. So we would need to look at the regional farm system, but just looking at what we could do in our neighborhoods and imagine how it would educate the people that get involved in that composting and green space stewardship.
It's fascinating because your background's in architecture. And
So I want to design to fix the problem.
No, but it all is so connected. That's
Yeah.
what I love about this work. Lisa, where does your work land on this? Are there planning and land use policies with the city of Boise that you can lean on?
Yeah, there are. I want to start though just talking about the circularity of a compost program. And one thing that we do in Boise that I think is pretty unique and is very cool is that we have a goal to give as much of our compost back to our city's soils as we possibly can. I think we have the most comprehensive give back program in the country. I'm not sure, but I haven't found another city that has more. But we operate 2 sites where residents who are part of the program can come pick up compost. They're allowed to take up to 2 yards a year, which is a significant amount of material. And then part of our structure of our funding of our program is we actually pay to get compost moved and spread across our parks. And as you mentioned, we could use every bit of compost that we make at our parks. It's just we're limited in time and staffing to get all that spreading done. And we don't sell as much of our compost as we probably could to make the program cost a little bit less, but we really measure that value in what we're putting into our soil, both in the ability to retain water because we are a desert. So that helps a lot. And then also to nurture the trees and greenery that grow in our city so we can sequester more carbon and continue to work towards our climate goals. And
I'm just going to say that's amazing you
Yeah.
do that. And I wonder if you actually measure the reduction in irrigation you have to do, or
you can. It's very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of statistics on, and I'm going to mess this up because I don't have it right in front of me. But as you increase the organic matter in your soil becomes more of a sponge and it can retain water. So when you live in climates where we don't get a lot of rainfall, it means that, one, if it does rain, we can hold that water and it can sit in that topsoil for just a little while longer to nurture our plants. Or if you're running an irrigation system, if you have to irrigate your lawn, say every day or every couple days, you can reduce that and maybe run it every 4 days instead of every other day, and your soil is able to retain water. It kind of course, depends on the ecosystem of where you live in the country, but out in the desert where we have clay soils, it's extremely valuable, and it helps us reduce our water. So, as far as the zoning, one thing that we have done in Boise that's also been a really big benefit is we have now a standard with all new development where compost must be incorporated in disturbed soils within the city. It's been a little harder to enforce than it was to get through zoning, but we'll work through that. So.
that's another great one. That's what I'm trying to, in New York City, require more compost use for stormwater maintenance of parks. And Washington State, having the soils for salmon, has great need for compost, but that's the best one I've found nationwide.
I feel like Idaho needs to win an award after this panel. You guys are doing so much great work. Okay, we were talking about people and how we need sort of the people's will. Claire, we can still design for participation, but what are some real tangible practices that have made reducing food waste easier or more attractive to people?
Well, we've done a lot of guidelines about how you can make it, how you can design to get to zero waste in different types of spaces. These are all part of the zero waste design guidelines, which you can get on our website. It's downloadable for free. But it's really both customers and front of house. What can you do to help people create less waste and then separate it correctly, and back of house? So just in this design here, we heard a little bit from Google this morning, like putting less food out, so shallower buffet trays or smaller ones. Having reusable dishware is huge. You really have so much less confusion on the part of people when they're separating their waste if they don't have to deal with this is compostable, this is plastic, and everything's reusable. It's much easier to separate the food waste. having central waste stations. We know in our offices, if you have desk bins, are you going to separate into 4 streams? Likely not. So central waste stations are a big thing. And then here, back of house, like having a refrigerator for food donations. We know how important the cold chain is. Is that accessible after hours, say, for someone to pick stuff up? Having tracking, having dishwashing, having reusable crates. There's just so many small things that your designer may not think of that we've tried to kind of make easy in our design strategies for different types of spaces.
Amazing. Let's go to you, Heidi. We'll start with Heidi. We'll talk about collaboration. We have folks from different backgrounds in the room and on this panel. What types of collaboration have been essential for your work to move forward? And who do you wish was more involved? Who do we need at the table?
So collaboration is at the heart of what we do because nobody has the full solution alone. So Clean Memphis as a nonprofit who really has their eye on this whole ball, works with our local utility companies to give discounts to food businesses, restaurants, and residents. We make sure that the food businesses know about these discounts to use less energy, to use LED bulbs, things like that. We partner with a local compost startup that is starting to offer their services throughout the city, and we offer a discount for their services to the organizations in our network. We work with our school system, and that earlier slide gave a picture of some of the variety of activities that we do, but we're in the classrooms with kids, we're doing share tables, we're doing sorts. We're just embarking on a new collaboration with the Overton Park Shell, which is a landmark in Memphis. It is a stage where we have free concerts throughout the spring, summer, and fall. Elvis played on that stage, Long Live the King. And we were there last Friday night. It was 93 degrees and about 93% humidity, and we were standing at zero waste stations. So we had compost and recycling and landfill. And those 3 waste bins, I see them all over here in Seattle. I don't see them in Memphis unless it's a Clean Memphis event. So our team was standing there, and as people were coming up with their trash, kind of looking a little bit scared because usually there's not a monitor by your trash, and we would help them to sort, which items go where. And we can do that with a smile. We can help, I think earlier in the day, Joel was talking about the stigma of waste and just how scared people are that you would see what they're wasting or they're not using. And so we have lipstick, we have a smile, and we are there to just have fun with them. We actually travel with a giant 7-foot green fork named Linda. We do food waste trivia, and we try to make this whole issue accessible and approachable to whoever walks up to our trash bin. You can't think of yourself as high and esoteric when you're standing at a zero waste station. Who do we wish was at the table with us? Of course, we would love to have more policy makers, more funders, and not just so that they would hear what we want to say, but so that we can hear from them as well, because circularity is feedback loops.
I love the grassroots initiatives really making impact. Yeah. Lipstick, a fork named Linda. That's what we need in Canada.
It's replicable, people.
Truly. Calgary will be the next city, just watch. Lisa, I'll go to you to answer the same question. Who do you wish was more involved in your work, and what would it take to build stronger citywide or statewide coordination?
I mean, I think Linda the Green Fork would be welcome, but I'm not sure she's going to be traveling. I think just to kind of play off what Heidi was saying, I think one thing with the public, it's always so important to assume good intent. People do struggle to sort their waste. We've known this from recycling over the last 40 years. It still doesn't work. We still can't seem to figure out the difference between cardboard and plastic, and I don't know. But assume good intention, and with organics, it becomes incredibly difficult to sort things. It truly is difficult, and it's a constantly changing, complex environment. As far as collaboration, I think that some of our most important partners, and this may not be popular, but the reality is our franchise hauler within our city, we have Republic Services. A lot of big cities have them. I know that can sometimes feel like a a big lift, but to build relationships with those haulers can make a big difference as we look further down the system into the kind of the smaller decentralized collection opportunities. They are a player, they're a major player, and they transport an incredible amount of waste, both as recycling organics and actual trash out of our cities. And without those relationships and those franchise haulers, we would have a lot of trash all around us, and it would be awful. So I think those are very important relationships. We also work closely with our schools and with nonprofits and with businesses in our community, constantly trying to figure out how can we assist them in doing better and how can we reevaluate the services we're providing. And then who do we wish was at the table more? Honestly, it would be wonderful if we just had more collaboration with our locally elected officials. It's important to, if you haven't had a civics lesson since high school, to go back and reevaluate that. And every single city and county and municipality operates a little bit differently. But typically, administrative staff who you might be working with in your day-to-day programs doesn't have a lot of control over the big picture budget or the big picture city initiatives. And so I always wish we had a little bit more of those folks coming to the table, our city council staff and the mayor's staff, and having our community not just reaching out to us with what they want, but also reaching out to those elected officials. So,
I love that. Claire.
Yeah, so when we did the zero waste design guidelines, we went out to like 40 different buildings and we talked with the people who actually manage the waste, the porters, and we followed the path of waste from where it's thrown away to where it's collected. And that was really eye-opening to see the frictions that are dealt with daily. And you may have thrown something away, right, but if they don't have a space to store it and everything gets mixed or the collection isn't working, it's not going to stay separated. So there was a lot of collaboration there on the waste side with the building managers, the building porters, the developers, the haulers, the Department of Sanitation, the Department of Transportation, because it really is a spatial issue in our streets, building department, housing preservation department, NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority. A lot of collaboration there, community composters as well, kind of trying to figure out the puzzle from building to collection. And that's all great. And lots of those people hadn't talked before. Department of Transportation said, oh, we've never talked to the Department of Sanitation because waste is temporary on our streets. If anybody's gone to New York City, it doesn't feel very temporary. But when you think of circularity, I mean, you look at Department of Sanitation, they're like, we have no power. We're just whatever rains down on us, we have to deal with. So you really need to look upstream. So I would like a lot more upstream agencies to be part of the conversation, economic development. We would need all these circularity things. We're defunding libraries. Think of all the things libraries could be loaning, apart from books that could reduce the amount of consumption we have. They are starting to. You can actually borrow sewing machines and musical instruments in Brooklyn or ties in Queens. But it could be so much more than that. And so really looking at collaboration, I think, upstream is where it needs to happen.
That's great. That's
And
great.
what I didn't say at the beginning about our infrastructure, obviously in New York City, many of you know we have a lot on food donation, city harvest, food banks, rescuing leftover cuisine, kind of at every level, rethink food, whether it's prepared, cooked. There's a lot there as well, which could be supported more. We could have a reusable cup program citywide for takeout. There's so much density that it could be kind of easy.
Yeah, I think the lesson here, I mean, this is a conference of 780 people. Talk to someone who's not in your exact sector to see what could happen. Okay, so before a lightning round, before Q&A, I want to bring up this notion of inclusive cities. And I talk about this often. So I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, which is just north of Montana. My parents are immigrants. I remember my mom working 3 jobs growing up, one at a grocery store so we could get access to affordable food. And so when we talk about circular cities, we also have to talk about how they can be more inclusive. And so the question is, how do we make sure that underserved communities aren't left out of food recovery or policy conversations? And how do you bring community into the design of these systems? And I'm going to start with Heidi, because I have a pretty slide here.
All right. So something that I didn't mention when kind of giving you the rundown on Memphis is that we have a higher than the national average rate of poverty. So food insecurity is kind of never far from our minds and our policymakers' minds as well. And we do have some of the food donation structures. We have a great food bank, and we do have some of that infrastructure in our city. It's just kind of somewhat disconnected sometimes. So we were very fortunate early on in our food waste reduction work to get a nudge from Natural Resources Defense Council to start with a landscape assessment of nonprofit organizations with food programs. So we sent out surveys, we brought those groups together, and we said, what's going on? What do you need? What do you lack? And we heard from them that they needed more connections, both with each other and with more food donors. They needed better record-keeping abilities. And so we were able to take that feedback in creating our program. We took their record-keeping request and investigated food rescue software. And so now we sponsor the Carrot platform for our entire area. So nonprofits don't pay for it, and businesses don't pay for it. So that's one barrier that we can take away for more connectedness. My little graphic there incorporates our 3 pillars that our organization strives for: is education, navigation, and collaboration, and then interspersing those pillars, which we are doing constantly. I guess this is sort of a reimagining of a materials circularity in terms of how we interact with people. We partner with businesses, nonprofits, and I would add schools to that one. And then the events is really the public awareness as well. So we really try to keep the feedback loops open. Every conversation we have with a business leader, with a nonprofit, with a student, with anybody in our city tells us more about our city and what our city needs. So we're always learning, I guess. In that, we're in that circle forever.
Yeah, it's a great graphic to represent that for sure. Lisa, I'll go to you.
So for inclusivity, so we actually, our city, our tagline, our mayor's tagline is, we're a city for everyone. So always working to try to make sure that it is an equitable city. When it comes to organics recycling, there's 2 things I wanted to point to that we do. One is we don't charge more to recycle or to recycle organics. I think that there are a lot of places where there's kind of this idea that rates should be tied to the services you have. And I would just say there's better ways to do that. Make the people that generate just trash pay for the people that are sorting their waste and doing the right thing. I mean, we do that. So our rates, it's actually less expensive if you do have your 3 different carts if you're at a home. It gives us the ability to pull a cart if someone's a frequent contaminator, and then their rates go up. So it's just kind of an automatic enforcement mechanism without having to write a bunch of tickets. So that's good. And then the other equity piece is that I think that in many cities, as we urbanize, I mean, New York's totally different, but we are at a point now in Boise where just over 20% of our housing is multifamily. And so we don't have curbside compost available, and we've really struggled with the equity of that. Not all folks who live in multifamily housing are economically disadvantaged, but probably a majority are, less so than those who live in single-family homes. And so like the food scrap drop-off program really was initiated to try to address that. I had an experience a couple months ago. We were reaching out to some of our county and city housing authorities and doing some outreach with residents who lived in some very, very subsidized housing within Boise. And going into it, we were kind of like, oh, how can we go in and ask these folks who are living paycheck to paycheck and barely getting by to collect their food waste and to walk over to a park? And we felt a little bit unsure about that, and went into that meeting and framed it as providing the opportunity for people to take individual climate action. And even as I said it, I was like, I hope this is gonna land okay. But we walked out of that meeting with the conversation behind me being like, who's gonna do this? Who's gonna lead it? Who's gonna be my second? Who's gonna be able to walk it up Monday? And it was just really, really inspiring. I think when you give people the opportunity to participate and do the right thing, most people do.
It's a good way to position it too. Claire.
Yeah, it makes me think actually of New York a lot, that given the opportunity, because in New York the community composting really came out of burning of the South Bronx and trying to rebuild neighborhoods and get soil for these community neighborhood gardens. So it was really across many areas of the city that were the least resourced. But then when the Department of Sanitation did their kind of test brown bin municipal collection, it was in the more affluent but lower scale neighborhoods, Park Slope, for example, and other neighborhoods were like, why don't we have the opportunity to compost? So it became an opportunity, and it was like, we who suffer most from waste transfer stations and truck traffic should have the opportunity to solve the problem. And Sandy Nurse is very inspirational to me. She started a community compost organization. She didn't know anything about composting at the time, but she was good at building stuff. And then she became a city council member. And then she became head of the sanitation committee. And it was her that put through all the Zero Waste Act policies. So, demanding the opportunity to do it and then changing the policy to do it. And then now it has become citywide, in part a lot thanks to her, the collection. So I think, that's just a really good way of seeing how inclusivity works. And as you say, the opportunity to be part of the solution, not just suffer from the problem.
I love the politician also that starts from the problem.
Yeah.
Instead of sort of top down, it comes from the bottom up. Okay, lightning round before Q&A. Everyone get your questions ready. In one sentence, I'll start with Lisa. What is your vision for a circular city by 2030?
I think it's one where we can enact smart policies that promote inclusivity and help us move towards a new culture of reduction, reuse, and organics recycling when it's necessary.
Nice. Heidi.
I'm going to go for an analogy rather than a sentence. So I think of the number of pounds that we divert or that we rescue a little bit like the number of pounds you can bench at the gym. It's a fun number to say, and it's kind of like, well, how much can you lift? And it's one indicator of progress that you're making in your health journey. But it might not necessarily show all the ways that you're becoming stronger. So I think those indicators are much better shown in the number, variety, and quality of your relationships. So do people call you back? Do they tell their friends about you at church? Is your movement starting to take hold without you necessarily being directly involved? And that is my vision for Circular Memphis.
Okay, sentence analogy. I'm going to go for a visual.
All right, I will allow it as the polite Canadian. There you go.
Okay, this is like a linear city. Unused buildings full of unused things, these kind of mini storage. Our city's drowning in single-use disposables, deliveries. It's designed for trucks, fulfillment centers. This is what a linear city looks like. Versus a circular city where we don't really need to have big trucks because we can have little micro haulers collecting stuff. We can have libraries for more than books. Then our streets can be reclaimed by people and can have low impact vehicles, and we can have our regional food grown in our compost, and we can have people maintaining our green infrastructure because community will be a huge part of it.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful world. Thank you, all three of you. Yes, round of applause for the panel. Questions? Okay. Here, take my, okay. Yes, over here.
I think I can project pretty loudly. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I was really inspired many years ago in New York of seeing many of the farmers markets. Actually, before the city was doing food scrap collection, farmers were taking scraps back to their farms. And some food safety regulations make that harder to really close that circular loop where farmers are actually taking those scraps back and really growing food. Some of us saw yesterday in Seattle a farm that is both growing from compost. I'm curious where you're seeing those specific in the circularity of transit from food waste out to places that need it, and even with community gardens that are doing the same thing, like closing that specific loop directly.
That is a real passion. And actually, lots of the collection of food scraps in those in the food markets was actually going to community composters rather than back to the farms. But that is something that I'm kind of passionate about. How can the excess food waste go back to the regional farm system? And I've just applied for a grant to look at that in collaboration with American Farmland Trust. So I hope we get that. But yeah, I think it's a huge thing that people try and solve and hasn't been solved yet. And the expedient thing to send the food scraps to the sewage treatment plant to make biogas, I can see why the city is doing it, but we all know that's not what we want, where we want to recover the nutrients and soils are really, really degraded. So we need to work to do that. And I've been so impressed to hear so much about reverse logistics with food donations. And I'm like, wow, people are really solving it in terms of the truck that's delivering the food, taking the food donations back in so many places. So I would love to see more of that reverse logistics for food waste being taken back to the regional farm system, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm from Portland. I'm working on a project to reduce food waste in every level. I have a question. How come nobody's talking about having a cooking class in schools so that children will learn about how to cook healthy food and eat it and not to waste it? Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. And I would love to have the kids do more cooking. Our education team does have a lot of hands-on lessons with kids, but the food they would use is probably not cooked. So, I know that they've been working in the schools over the summer and, using books children's books about food as a catalyst for conversations, for projects. I think they made my colleague Michelle is here. Did you all make like your own self-portraits in food and then eat them? Yes. Okay, that is a true story. Fruit made of fruits and vegetables. So if we don't have the equipment or the clearance for cooking, there's a lot of ways that we can incorporate raw foods that are delicious and beautiful and really fun. So, but we'll keep it going.
No, I just think the children education is huge. Before I did this waste thing, we did a lot of greenhouses on school rooftops and seeing the kids grow their own food, and then they cooked with it, and then they compost their lunches, and the worms they fed to the fish, and then they grew the the basil off it in the aquaponics, and just the engagement of the kids and the changing in their eating habits is huge. Yes, I agree.
And they loved those food waste audits. I mean, if adults think that, ooh, that might be kind of messy, the kids are like, ooh, it's messy. And so we provided them lab coats, and they're scientists, and they're creating this data around, what their habits are and what their classmates' habits are in order to create a feedback loop around their own food. It's really empowering.
Thank you so much. This has really been fantastic and inspiring. I'm with RAP, and we work on consumer behavior change with many of you here in the room, including Denver. And we find that working with businesses, particularly grocery stores, is a really great way to reach the public. I was wondering if you could comment on how you're working with businesses to create circular cities. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can't comment on every city, but one thing that we are doing is we have a business award program within our solid waste division. We call it the Curb It Award because our program is called Curb It. But it just involves getting businesses to reach out to us, and it gives us the opportunity to go out and talk to them, and we do a walkthrough and a waste audit. But really, it gets the chance to have that conversation and to build a relationship with local businesses so that we can continue to grow our contacts. And typically, one leads to another, just like any other networking. And then it gives them a little sticker to put on there, and they get recognition with the Chamber of Commerce and things like that.
So Project Green Fork, which is a program of Clean Memphis, really started working with small, locally owned restaurants. And so we have a whole sustainability steps that they can incorporate in their journey toward being more of a green business. I've really been working in the last year or so really targeting local businesses who might not be donating food yet to be part of that network. and giving them, again, finding those little friction points. Maybe they don't know how they can donate, they don't know about liability. Maybe they're just worried about mixing up food from, that's meant to be donated with other food. So giving them donation stickers to make sure that they can donate safely and have that. I think of food donation as kind of the gateway to even more sustainability, because it's very applicable, it's very easy, and there's a lot of desire to be useful in the community. I think a lot of businesses, if I'm going to say, this will save you money, this will help the environment, and this will help our community, helping the community is going to be number one for most of the businesses that I've talked to. And so finding out where their priorities are and then asking where they'd like to go from there.
Hi. I have kind of a two-part question. The first part, do you use any AI tools in support of your programming? And if so, how do you balance the potential benefits of those tools on the systems with the very real impact of using AI on our climate, water use in ChatGPT, that kind of thing?
No, I don't, and I actually make all those read AIs turn off in any meetings. But maybe I'm missing something. But I have that similar worry.
That slide that was called pretty earlier, I tried to do it with AI first, and it kept misspelling everything, and it did the wrong pictures, and it made people have one leg, and I was like, AI is terrible, it can't do anything. So I'm not very deep into that world yet, but it's very relevant to Memphis because we have an ex-AI facility run by Mr. Musk, and there's a lot of environmental concerns in terms of air quality, in terms of it's located in a very vulnerable community that has suffered decades of pollution. So I guess it's complicated, and we'll be watching to see where it goes and how to use it going forward.
I agree with all of that. So. Yes, in the West, we're definitely being impacted by the data centers and the water usage. We struggle a lot with water, and it's a big deal. The amount of water they use and what comes out of those data centers is very salinated, very concentrated water, and it's difficult to deal with. So, yeah. However, AI can do some really amazing things and speed up a lot of our processes.
Hi, quick question. So based on that question and also the school question earlier, kind of interested to hear how state level decisions maybe impact some of the things that happen at the city level. Because I love that cities can iterate so quickly and can be so innovative, but we've heard, so I'm from the Food Law and Policy Clinic at Harvard Law School. We've just heard some cities talk about like state policy sometimes gets in the way of cities being able to innovate quickly or implement things quickly. So just kind of want to hear what it's been like navigating different, both Idaho, Texas, state level policies with trying to reduce food waste and get food to people.
Well, in Idaho, in some ways we're fortunate because our state is not super interested in regulating what's happening with the recycling world in some ways. But they are interested in regulating what Boise wants to do, because we are seen as there's a constant battle of like local and state control, and we're kind of beholden to them. I think the way that affects the work we do is we have to just do it, because sometimes when you get out there and we kind of start to talk too much about specific things, we find the city will move forward. This hasn't happened in our solid waste world, but other things, the city will move forward and we'll do something. It's a step in the right direction. It helps people, et cetera, et cetera. And then the following year, our legislature will put a ban on whatever that was and undo all the policy work that was done. So sometimes we have to choose to just do the right thing and continue forward.
I'm not touching American politics, but I'll just say that there's 10 more minutes, and maybe 2 more questions. Oh, I can't pick. I'm not okay, the Canadian, the other. Okay, we'll go here, and then the other Canadian in the room. Perfect.
The disappointment on everyone's face when I go the other way. It's just hard.
No, I hear you.
So I have an answer for the question over here. I used to work for Grow NYC. We did the compost rollout with the thing. So back in the day, when trash started getting picked up municipally, it was the gangsters because then they found, oh, I can haul away bodies. And so, in order to be somebody who moves trash in New York, you have to pay exorbitant fees to be able to be registered that you're not going to be hauling away bodies. So, that was what was preventing the community composters until Department of Sanitation in New York said, okay, what if we give these community composters a part of our ability, like our registered ability to start doing the compost thing? So that actually then is surfacing in like Los Angeles when they were trying to do their franchise programs. And for anybody who's interested in cities, like trash, the reason that community composting is so hard is because it's expensive, so that we don't have gangsters getting rid of bodies.
I feel like I'm in a movie.
Yeah, I know. But I have a question for all of you.
Please.
So the cities now are, you guys all each individually have great programs. Are there other cities or states or people that are talking to you about, hey, how can I learn from you and implement this in my city?
That's what today is, right?
Yeah.
There's a sign up in the back. No. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration in this space. I mean, this is the biggest gathering of, folks who really have their eye on this ball. But there are great networks put together by Natural Resources Defense Council and others who have peer cities learning from each other. You asked earlier about, Memphis. We like to find the scrappy peer cities, cities who would not actually like state policy because if the state tells us to, then we might not do it. So, we can find peer cities not just in our region, but if you're a scrappy city, I want to talk to you because we probably have a lot in common.
Yeah, and I'd say we look to and talk to peer cities and other folks, both in the private and public sector, all around the country, and try to take these opportunities to reach out. The U.S. Composting Council also is a wonderful resource in both the composting and the food waste recovery space. But yeah, absolutely. So collaborate away.
Yeah, and in terms of like the zero waste design guidelines, they were done kind of for any city, but based on New York City's infrastructure. So we have thought how they could be changed to other cities and how we could engage architects and designers in other cities. But in recent years, we've kind of been a little bit overtaken with how much there is to do in New York City, but that's still on the table to go to other cities. And we were talking with San Francisco and actually Seattle a little bit at the very beginning. The Canadian has a question.
Just a statement about MVPs in the NBA that come from Hamilton, Ontario. I'm Richard Knead. I'm from Victoria, BC, Canada. And I would encourage anybody to go there. Amazing panel, really good work. It's amazing for me as a geographer by trade that 3 completely different cities, although I haven't been to the one in Iowa, but I have been to Iowa. That so many different solutions at so many different levels. I've heard 2 themes in the last day. One around reverse logistics, and one around private fleets that have capacity. So that kind of makes me think about all of those darn Amazon trucks and how we can leverage the private networks, especially in cities like New York. So any thoughts about leveraging networks that are out there?
Yes, but they're pretty vague, those thoughts currently. But we did just look at, like, New York State was didn't actually pass a bigger, better bottle bill to increase the deposits from 5 cents to 10 cents. And we were looking at what infrastructure would look like in New York City. So we were looking a lot about the amount of trucks for that. For beverages and taking back the beverage containers, and like, could it be reverse logistics from delivering bottles and beer and everything to the distributors or to the restaurants, and how much could go in reverse logistics? So it's something always on my mind to use that empty truck space. And when I travel in Europe, I've seen a lot of, like in Denmark, they had a reusable cup program for the whole city, and they were doing the reverse logistics to take the cups back, or it happens the whole time where they're delivering and taking back. So it's something I've thought about, but it's not something we've actually studied, but I think it's really important.
Well, you just piqued my interest because in Memphis, I don't know if you know, FedEx is headquartered in Memphis, and the founder Fred Smith, just died this weekend. And I don't know if you know the history, but he in college decided that delivery time shouldn't be 6 to 8 weeks. They should be 16 hours. And so he cracked that logistics code of how to get something to a place faster. So I think those business partnerships, those people who know how to think about big ideas, things that weren't considered possible, they exist among us in all kinds of forms.
And just one more thing I wanted to say on that. When we were looking at that reverse infrastructure, of course, nobody wants their bottle depot in their neighborhood, but they do want the micro hubs for deliveries. So we're like, how can we co-locate this? And that works, because when we get to a circular city, it's not new stuff in, old stuff out. It's just movement of goods. So co-locating deliveries and take back, whatever it is, makes a lot of sense, especially for those last mile deliveries that we're doing in New York City where the trucks stops and it goes to hand carts, so it can go both ways there too.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much for coming.